Chapter 2595. Fengzhou sat in the small tent eating pastries. When she heard the young girl's words, her eyes flashed. The heart of the island. The heart of the Penglai immortal island. Her heart skipped a beat, and the speed of her eating slowed down. The beautiful woman was pulled to the front of the small tent by the young girl. When she saw the thin and weak figure sitting in the small tent, she couldn't help but be startled. She heard from her daughter that it was a young boy, but she didn't expect the young boy to be so thin and small. Seeing the young boy, who was about the same age as her son and daughter, sitting there eating alone, she couldn't help but feel motherly. "Why are you here by yourself? How could your family be at ease letting you travel alone?" the beautiful woman asked in a gentle voice. Her gentle gaze fell on Fengzhou's face. Fengzhou took a bite of the pastries. Her clear eyes blinked and there was a simple and honest expression between her brows. She tilted her head slightly and looked at her without saying a word. "My mother is asking you a question. Why aren't you answering? Could it be that you're a mute?" The young boy shouted and glanced at Fengzhou impatiently. Once he said those words, the others were all startled. Mute? The beautiful woman and her husband looked at each other. Finally, she looked at Fengzhou and asked, "Are you unable to speak?" Fengzhou thought for a moment and nodded. She held the pastries with both hands and continued to eat. Her actions and appearance were like a child who had been starving for a long time. "Husband, look at this child." The beautiful woman looked at her husband and hesitated. "Madam, you're not thinking of picking him up and bringing him along, are you? This is a human, not a small animal." The man shook his head and smiled with a helpless expression. "No, I'm thinking that our carriage also has space. If this child is going the same way as us, why don't we bring him along so that he won't encounter any danger on the road?" the beautiful woman said gently. Seeing this, the middle-aged man didn't speak. He only stared at Fengzhou and sized him up. "Do you want to come with us? We have a carriage that can bring you along. In any case, the road is still far away. You can come with us." The young girl squatted in front of Fengzhou and looked at her with a smile. Hearing this, Fengzhou was slightly startled. She blinked her clear and harmless eyes at the people in front of her. Finally thought and nodded. At the same time, she extended her hand and handed a pastry to the young girl to show her friendliness. "He, for me to eat. What kind of pastry is this?" The young girl was not wary of others. Seeing Fengzhou pass the pastry to her, she picked it up and was about to eat it when the middle-aged man beside her coughed softly. "Little Shi, have you forgotten what father said to you again? When you're outside, don't simply eat things given by strangers." The middle-aged man said calmly. Hearing this, she said, he's "What's more, he doesn't know us and won't poison us. What's there to be afraid of?" As he spoke, he took a bite of the pastry. It's delicious." She smiled at her parents and said to Fengzhou, "Thank you. My name is Xie." The poem at the front is the poem of poetry and the poem at the back is the poem of yearning. My family calls me Little Shi. What's your name? Just call him Mute. What's the point of calling him that? The young man kicked the dirt on the ground and snorted. He looked at Fengzhou with disdain. Chapter 2596. Fengzhou came out from the tent and put away the small tent. The young girl beside him was chattering non-stop. Beside the carriage, the old man saw the two of them coming over and looked towards the figure who was putting away the small tent. He asked, "You want to bring that young man with you?" The middle-aged man looked back and said, "That young man looks very ordinary. He has a simple and honest face. I can see that he is just an ordinary child with a little bit of cultivation. He is also a mute who can't speak. In addition, Xiao sure likes him very much, so I thought that it would be fine to bring him along. Let him sit outside the carriage with the coachman and let him leave when we reach the city. A child who didn't seem to be a threat. Since his wife and daughter wanted to help him, he would agree to it. When the old man heard this, he nodded and said, "Let them enter the carriage." With that, he entered the carriage first. The beautiful woman and the middle-aged man sat in the back carriage, while the old man and the siblings sat in the front carriage. Fengzhou stood to the side, hesitating about which carriage to sit in. Then, he saw the young girl stretch her head out and waved at him. "Sit here. Come quickly." He paused for a moment, then walked into the carriage and sat beside the coachman. However, the moment he sat down, he was pulled into the carriage by the young girl. "Little sister, why did you pull him in? He looks so dirty." The young man frowned and avoided Fengzhou, not wanting to touch him. "Yutang, how can you speak like that?" The old man who had his eyes closed opened his eyes when he heard his words. He frowned as he looked at the young man. His old voice was filled with vigor as he said, "Although the strong are respected in this world, words and deeds are also very important. Today, you are a descendant of the Xia family, so your status is respected. But if you weren't a descendant of the Xia family and were just a commoner, what would happen?" When the young man heard the old man's words, his face turned red. He lowered his head. "Grandfather, Grandfather doesn't want to scold you. I just want to teach you how to conduct yourself. You are still young now, but in a few years, if your words and deeds are still like this, people will only look down on you. You must remember, if you want people to respect you, you must respect others first." The old man's voice was deep as he lectured. At the same time, his gaze turned to Fengzhou. When Fengzhou heard the old man's words, he couldn't help but be surprised. In this world where the strong were respected, it was rare for the old man to teach his children like this. But no matter how strong one's strength, one's heart. Moreover, if one were to speak with disdain, contempt, and disdain, then how could such a person obtain the respect of others? Yes. Big brother, you should listen to Grandpa's words more. Grandpa's words make the most sense. The girl said with a smile. Is it natural or acquired? The old man looked at Fengzhou and asked. When she met the old man's gaze, she paused for a moment. She saw a small tea table in the middle of the carriage and there was a pot of tea on it. She dipped her finger into the tea and wrote a few words on the table, telling him that she couldn't speak because of a recent injury to her throat and that she would recover in a few days. Seeing this, the old man nodded and said, "Since we have met, it must be fate. Let's keep them company for the rest of the journey." Fengzhou looked at the two of them and nodded. Chapter 2597. The girl blinked her eyes and asked Fengzhou with a smile. Seeing this, Fengzhou wrote Fengzhou on the table. Fengzhou. Your name is so simple, but I don't think I've heard of the surname Feng. The girl looked at the old man and asked, Grandpa, have you heard of the surname Feng? The surname Feng is not common. The old man looked at Fengzhou and asked, Where are you from? Where are you going? Hearing this, Fengzhou wrote the words vagrant cultivator on the table. You call yourself a vagrant cultivator? You're even weaker than me. Shai Yutang glanced at Fengzhou and whispered, Vagrant. No wonder he sleeps in a small tent on the side of the road. Fengzhou, who was sitting in the carriage with them, gradually fell asleep during the questions and answers. She leaned against the corner of the carriage and fell into a deep sleep, her whole body slanting over. As the night deepened, the brother and sister also fell asleep. Only the old man opened his eyes after they fell asleep, and his wise eyes fell on Feng 9. After chatting for a while and observing him, he found that this youth was ordinary and unremarkable. Since he wasn't a threat to them, he didn't pay too much attention to him. He leaned against the carriage and fell asleep. Fengjiu closed his eyes and breathed deeply, but he was not asleep. She was thinking in her heart. First, she was unfamiliar with this place and it would not be easy to find the heart of the island. Second, she happened to meet the people of the Xie family. It seemed that they were also going to the heart of the island. Instead of looking for it herself, it was better to follow them first and find an opportunity to go there. In particular, the ladder of immortality was so mysterious. She also wanted to take advantage of this period of time to find out more about the ladder of immortality and learn more about this place called Penglai. Therefore, she thought it would be a good choice to follow the people of the Xie family. More importantly, she felt that the people of the Xie family were very pleasing to the eye. The spirit beast carriage ran at an extremely fast speed, and the sound of its hooves was like a lullaby in the night, causing the people in the carriage to fall asleep as they listened to the sound of the horse hooves. The night passed peacefully. However, when it was almost dawn, the spirit beast carriage suddenly stopped as if it was hit by something. Because of the inertia, the people in the carriage also swooped out. "Ah! What happened?" Xie Shirsi exclaimed. After stabilizing herself, she stuck her head out of the window. However, when Feng Jiu raised his eyes and glanced over, he saw a flash of cold light. He immediately stretched out his hand and pulled her back. "Be careful!" the old man exclaimed in a low voice. His heart seemed to be in his throat at that moment. When he saw the sharp sword cutting through the window with his own eyes, he couldn't help but sweat in his heart. If it weren't for Fengjiu pulling her back, his granddaughter would have been beheaded. Xie Shirsi, who fell in the carriage, turned pale and asked, "What's wrong?" "I just felt like my body was trapped and I couldn't move," she said with lingering fear and patted her chest. Shai Yutang also came to his senses and said, "Listen, why does it seem that there is a fight outside?" Chapter 2598. "Grandpa, the coachman was killed," Shai Yutang said with an ugly face. He stood up and jumped out of the carriage, ready to join the battle. "Come back. Don't run around." The old man's face sank and he shouted. Seeing that his grandson had jumped out of the carriage, he pulled Xie Shirsi out of the carriage. Seeing this, Fengjiu, who was still in the carriage, also got out of the carriage. He glanced around and saw that there were more than 20 black-robed men who attacked the Xie family, while there were only a dozen shadow guards who followed and protected them in the dark. Although their strength was almost the same, the situation was not optimistic because there were so many of them. In particular, other than the hidden guards, the only ones who were relatively strong in the two carriages were the old man and the middle-aged man. Now, the old man had to protect his grandsons, and the middle-aged man had to protect his wife who didn't have any fighting strength. Seeing that the beautiful woman was hiding beside the middle-aged man, she was obviously afraid but still didn't say a word. She couldn't help being curious. The Xie family sounded like a big family. Why did they marry a woman who had no cultivation? It was strange. Hiss. Shai Yutang couldn't dodge in time. His arm was cut by the sword chi of a black-robed man's long sword. Blood suddenly oozed out, which made him instinctively exclaim and stagger back. However, at this time, the black-robed man's long sword went straight up and aimed at Shai Yutang's life. It seemed that he was ready to kill him. "Yutang! Be careful, Yutang!" The old man couldn't go forward because he was protecting his granddaughter, and the middle-aged man couldn't leave because he was protecting his beautiful wife. Seeing that Shai Yutang was about to be killed, the two men's eyes turned red and their killing intent burst out. The long swords were even more fierce. Both of them wanted to rush forward to save him. However, at this time, Fengzhou, who was standing beside the carriage, moved quickly and pulled Xia Yutang's collar, pulling him behind him. The sword also stabbed down at the same time. The fierce sword chi whistled past, which made Xia Yutang's face change slightly and his movements become stiff. After seeing that he had dodged the fatal blow, the Xia family members heaved a sigh of relief. They tried their best to gather together, protecting the weak behind them. Fengzhou pulled Xia Yutang to avoid the attacks of those people. Because Xia Yutang was frightened, his reaction was half a beat slower. Even when the knife in the hand of a man in black fell between the two of them were separated by a small distance. Fengzhou's eyes flashed when he saw the two black-clothed men approaching. If she had used her full strength, she would have been able to dodge them easily. She could have even killed the two men in black. However, she would have exposed her true strength. If she had exposed her true strength, it would have been difficult for her to approach the Xia clan. Thinking of this, her heart moved slightly. When she saw the two men in black coming, she rushed forward, hugged Xia Yutang, pushed him down, and rolled to the side of the old man. However, when the two of them were rolling away, Fengzhou saw a cold light refracting towards him. He was originally prepared to avoid it, but when he got closer, he changed his mind and raised his hand to block it. Chapter 2599. Fengzhou covered his wound with one hand and endured the pain as he stood up. At this moment, the old man pushed Xia Shirsi to her side. Then, in a flash, he rushed out and killed the two black-robed men in an instant. With the deaths of those people, the number of black-robed men gradually decreased. The remaining few saw that the situation was not good and immediately retreated. As those people retreated, the surroundings regained its tranquility. However, whether it was the corpses on the ground or the smell of blood in the air, it was impossible to ignore Tang. How are you? Are you hurt? The beautiful woman hurriedly helped her son up from the ground and looked at him from head to toe. Mother, Big Brother's arm was scratched. It's not a big deal. Xia Shirsi said and looked at Fengzhou, but Fengzhou seems to be injured quite badly. This wound is still bleeding. Seeing this, the beautiful woman hurriedly went forward. Come, let me apply some medicine for you and bandage your wound. She took out some medicine and hurriedly applied it on Fengzhou's wound while thanking her. If it wasn't for me, my family's Tang might not have survived. Thank you for saving him. You are his savior. Brother, come, let me apply medicine for your wound. As Xia Shirsi spoke, she came to her brother's side and checked his injured arm. After cleaning it, she sprinkled some medicine on it and bandaged it. Seeing that the situation had stabilized, the old man and the middle-aged man stood together and whispered something to each other while the shadow guards cleaned up the corpses on the ground. It's been a good journey. It's been peaceful and nothing has happened. I didn't expect them to be lying in ambush here. If there were more people, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to deal with them. The middle-aged man said in a low voice as he looked at his family and the injured youth. It's all thanks to him. If he hadn't pulled Yutang back, Yutang would be a corpse now. The middle-aged man sighed. He was injured in order to save Yutang. The old man also looked at Fengzhou with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Just now, I saw that his footwork was very strange. He moved his feet and his figure dashed out. His speed was very fast. It doesn't seem to match his strength. Hearing this, the middle-aged man glanced at Fengzhou before shifting his gaze away. Looking at the wives and children surrounding the young man, he couldn't help but reveal a serious expression. Father, we haven't even reached the main family and it's already like this. If we reach the main family, will this kind of thing happen every 2 or 3 days? You also know that they are not good at scheming. I am really worried that they will cause some trouble in the main house. Don't spout nonsense. The old man said in a deep voice. Until now, there is no evidence to say that it was done by the main family. We can't simply suspect. Who else could it be other than them? If it weren't for the people from the main house telling us to move to the main house, we wouldn't have encountered these things on the way. Alright, we'll talk about this later. Let's take a look at that young man first. The old man said as he walked towards Fingzhou. How is it? Is the injury serious? The old man asked as he looked at the young man's face while he endured the pain. It's not light, but I've already applied medicine. It's just that it won't heal for a few days. The beautiful woman said as she looked at the young man's bandaged arm and sighed in relief. Yutang, what are you still standing there for? Come and thank Xiaozhou. If it weren't for her, you would have been dead. Chapter 2600. Thank you. Sha Yutang said awkwardly in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, he ran to his mother's side. Feng Nine smiled and lowered her head to look at the wound that she had bandaged. Burn the corpses of our people and bring their ashes back. When the time comes, send them back to their families. The old man instructed the secret guards. He looked at the corpses and sighed softly in his heart. The fire rose in the night sky, illuminating half of the sky. A gust of wind blew, and there was a foul smell in the air. Those secret guards did as he said and cremated the bodies. After picking up the ashes, they took out jars from their chinquan bags and stored them inside. Fengzhou saw that they were skilled and prepared. Obviously, it was not the first time that they had done such a thing. It seemed that they had dealt with the dead secret guards in this way before. Compared with burying them, it was better to burn them like this to prevent future troubles. After all, no one knew if there would be any ferocious beasts digging up the bodies buried in the ground and gnawing them. If they burned the bodies and took the ashes back to their families, no one would worship them after they died. Let's go. Let's go back first. The old man said and motioned for them to get on the beast carriage. The guards who had been hiding in the dark also showed up and followed the carriage. They continued to move forward. As the sky gradually brightened, the carriage gradually approached the next town. The old man frowned slightly, looked at Fingzhou sitting beside him, and asked, Xiaozhou, what are you going to do next? Do you have relatives in the city? Hearing this, Fingzhou shook his head. Seeing this, the old man pondered. His eyes fell on his injured arm. After thinking for a while, he said, We are going back to the main family this time. We will settle down in the main family of the Xie family. If you come with us, I'm afraid. Hearing this, Sha Yutang glanced at Fingzhou, who was sitting beside him with his head down, and said, Grandpa, let him wear the clothes of a secret guard and pretend to be a secret guard in our mansion. Otherwise, let him be my manservant and follow me around. Hearing this, Fingzhou looked up at him with some surprise. What are you looking at? I just don't want to owe you a favor. Don't you have nowhere else to go? Since that's the case, you can stay by my side as my manservant. I can't promise you anything else, but I'll definitely provide you with 3 meals. The old man thought for a moment and looked at Fingzhou. If you really have nowhere else to go, then stay by Yutang's side. This young man seemed to have a calmer temperament than Yutang, and there was a simple and honest look between his brows. With his ability to read people, he didn't seem to be someone with bad intentions. When Fingzhou heard the old man's words, he smiled and nodded. He then wrote the word "thank you" on the table. That's great. Then you can play with me in the future, Xie Shirsi said happily. Let me tell you about our Xie clan. After arriving at the Xie clan, you should stay by Yutang's side. Don't be impulsive. After all, we're not direct descendants in a large clan, so it's hard for us to have a say. Fingzhou nodded and listened as the old man told the 3 of them about the things they needed to pay attention to when they arrived at the Xie residence. Chapter 2601. The old man shook his head and smiled. We are all members of the Xia family. If the main family asks us to go back, of course, we have to go back. What's more, it's a great thing in the eyes of others. After all, the collateral relatives have to rely on the main family. And after we go to the main family, we also have an independent courtyard. That's not as good as our original home. Sha Yutang said and stopped talking. He lowered his head and thought about something. Grandpa, we are collateral relatives of the Xia family. Will the people of the main family look down on us? Will they bully us? Xia Shirsi asked worriedly. Hearing this, the old man said, No, Grandpa said that we are all family. What's more, we have to be reasonable outside. We are not allowed to fight among our own family. You can rest assured. But what if they bully us? She still asked worriedly. Then come and tell Grandpa. Grandpa will deal with it. However, you are not young anymore. In the past, we protected you too well at home. You have to learn to get along with others appropriately. The old man said meaningfully. The carriage ran on the road. Because he didn't rest all night, Fengjiu fell asleep leaning on the carriage. After a long time, the carriage stopped and the voice of the shadow guard outside came. Old master, we are at the gate of the main family. The old man in the carriage got off first, and then Fengjiu and others followed. The middle-aged man and the beautiful woman in the carriage behind also came to the old man's side. Knock on the door. The old man motioned a shadow guard to come forward. Yes. The shadow guard answered. After knocking on the door, he reported the family's name. When the old man who opened the door heard that they were collateral relatives of the Xia family, he took a look outside and then invited them in. At the same time, he asked someone to hurry inside to report. As soon as the master of the Xia family heard the servant's report, he called all the people in the mansion and went to the front hall together. In the front hall, the old man and others were sitting. Fengjiu stood behind Sha Yutang and stood quietly with slightly lowered eyes. It was not until he heard the laughter outside that he raised his eyes slightly to look. Oh, as soon as I heard that Uncle Tokugawa was here, I came here immediately. A middle-aged man in an embroidered jade robe walked in with a smile on his face. His gaze landed on the old man. Uncle Tokugawa, thank you for not seeing you for a while. He bowed to the old man. Patriarch. The old man stood up after he came in. At this time, he also bowed to him. Then, he said to the middle-aged man and the beautiful woman, Come and greet the family head. We're all family, so there's no need for formalities. This must be little brother Yen and sister-in-law. Xia family head said with a smile. His gaze landed on the middle-aged man in front of him and the beautiful woman beside him. Greetings, Patriarch. The two of them bowed. Xia Yen smiled and said, This is my wife. These two are my children. Master. Sha Yutang and Xia Shirsi also stepped forward and saluted. What are your names? Xia family head asked with a smile, his gaze falling on the young man and the young girl. Master, my name is Sha Yutang. My name is Xia Shirsi. It's Shi from poetry and Si from yearning. She said with a smile. Oh, well, it's the first time we meet. Come on, this is a gift for you too. He fumbled in his sleeve and took out 2 jade pendants and handed them to them. Chapter 2602. Since the family head gave it to you, you should take it. The old man said with a smile. Hearing this, the two of them were overjoyed and smiled. Thank you, family head. They happily received the jade and thanked him. Fengjiu, who was standing at the side, only took a glance and could tell that the 2 jade pendants were magic weapons. Furthermore, the quality of the jade was not bad. She thought to herself, the Xia family head is quite generous, especially to the collateral family members. However, her gaze did not change as she glanced at the people who came in later. Seeing that each of them had extraordinary strength, she could not help but be slightly moved. The people from the Xia family seemed to be quite strong. From the looks of it, the Xia family should be an aristocratic family with 100 years of history. However, looking at the expressions of these people, some were disapproving and some were contemptuous. It seemed that the Xia family was not a very peaceful place. Come over. Let me introduce you. The Xia family head turned to look at the people behind him and asked them to come forward. Thus, he introduced them to each other. Fengjiu stood quietly at the side, listening and watching. After both sides had greeted each other, the Xia family head called for the housekeeper. Uncle Tokugawa, my father is currently in seclusion and has not come out yet. However, he has instructed us to give you a mansion in the south for you to live in. Knowing that you will be coming in a few days, I have already ordered people to clean it up. You can live there now. When the Xia family head said this, many people's expressions changed slightly. A mansion in the south. It seemed that the family head and the old master still valued this collateral family very much. To give them a mansion in the south showed how much they valued them. Since that was the case, they had to build a good relationship with them in the future. After all, from what they saw today, the old master's strength was so strong that none of the people present could compare to him. That was fine as he was from the same generation as the old master. However, his son's strength was also above them and could not be ignored. The Xia family head smiled and said, as for the people in the mansion, let Brother Yen find time to go to the slave market and buy some back. If you need anything in the future, feel free to ask. Thank you, family head. The old man replied and thanked him. How about this? All of you must be tired after rushing all the way back. I'll let the steward bring sister-in-law and Yutang back to the residence to rest first. As for Uncle Tokugawa and little brother Yen, please sit for a while. I still have some things to discuss with you. All right. The two of them replied. After informing the beautiful woman, they had them follow the housekeeper back. Fengjiu left with them. When they were outside, they could still faintly hear the sound of people talking. Fengjiu followed the housekeeper and arrived at another mansion. What surprised him was that the Xia clan had given a separate mansion to the branch family members. It was just that this mansion was adjacent to the Xia clan's main residence. Moreover, it had everything they needed, and the design of the courtyard was very pleasing to the eye. With just one look, she knew that this branch family was highly regarded by the main family. Although the people in the hall were strong, they were not as strong as the two branch family heads here. It was only natural that they were highly regarded. However, according to the patriarch's words, there were still a few elders who had yet to arrive. Naturally, there was no way to know the strength of those people. Chapter 2603. Yes. This place is so beautiful, even more beautiful than our original home. Xia Shirsi also said excitedly, looking around. The beautiful woman smiled gently and took them to look around. After familiarizing them with the environment, she let them choose a courtyard. Xiao Zhou, you can stay in the same courtyard as Yutang. The beautiful woman looked at Fengjiu and said. Fengjiu nodded and agreed. Shai Yutang just glanced at Fengjiu and did not object. He just said, Mother, although our mansion is big, we still need to buy servants. When are we going to buy some servants? Let's talk about it after we settle down. You're all tired today. Let's have a rest first. She said softly and let them go back to their courtyards. Then she went to the main courtyard. About an hour later, the old man and Xia Yan also came back. The old man also chose a courtyard to stay in, while the middle-aged man went to the main courtyard. After a rest, Xia Yan called them all together and said to them, "I'll take you out to eat today. When we come back, we'll go to the slave market and buy some servants." "Will Grandpa go?" Xia Shirsi asked. "Your grandpa wants to have a rest. He said not to disturb him. When we come back, we'll bring him some food." Xia Yan said and took them to the carriage out of the door. After dinner in the restaurant, Xia Yan took them to the slave market. He smiled and said to his son and daughter, "Today, I'll leave the work of choosing servants to you. It's a test of your eyesight. It's not difficult." Shai Yutang raised his chin slightly and walked forward, looking at the cages of slaves. After a long time, he frowned and came back. "Father, these people have cultivation. And the ones in the cages look very ferocious. I don't know where they came from. The ones in the cages are those with higher cultivations. Those are usually chosen as guards, but they are enough to protect our family, so there is no need for more. As for the servants, we need to find these stewards and have them bring some out for us to choose from." As he spoke, he pointed at one of the stewards. The beautiful woman had a smile on her face. She didn't say anything and just watched quietly. After Shai Yutang stepped forward and told the steward that he wanted to buy some servants, the steward recruited people and brought out 50 men and women. Most of these people were between 13 and 20 years old. Fengjiu glanced at them and saw that these people only had a small cultivation base. Their clothes were tattered and they stood there with their heads lowered. "Look up!" Shai Yutang shouted, and then looked at his sister. "Sister, you choose first." "Ah. I'll pick first." Xia Shirsi was stunned for a moment and turned to look at her mother. Although her mother had taught her how to pick people, she had never done it herself. "Go. Try it. If it doesn't work, I'll change it for you," the beautiful woman said and encouraged her to go forward. Thus, Xia Shirsi walked forward and looked at the 10 people in the first row one by one. Finally, she picked out 2 adorable twins from the first row. "Mother, I want these 2. They are twins and look exactly the same. In the future, let them stay by my side and serve me." She looked back at her mother with a smile. Chapter 2604. The beautiful woman glanced at the 2 girls, smiled, and turned to look at Fengjiu, asking, "Xiaozhou, what do you think of these 2 girls?" Hearing this, Xia Yan looked at his wife with some surprise. He didn't expect that she would ask Fengjiu's opinion. Not only were Xia Yu and Xia Yan stunned, but even Fengjiu was also stunned. She didn't hide the surprise in her eyes as she looked at the beautiful woman, as if she was surprised that she would ask her. However, she glanced at the twins and nodded. Xia Shirsi's eyesight was not bad. These 2 little girls were very perceptive. Although they were happy when Xia Shirsi chose them, they also looked at the beautiful woman with apprehension. Obviously, they knew that the beautiful woman would be the one to make the final decision. Moreover, the cultivation of these 2 girls was not strong or weak among these people. They were above average. In addition, their appearance was pleasing, so they could be bought and placed by Xia Shirsi's side. Seeing Fengjiu nod, the beautiful woman smiled softly and said to her daughter, "Since Xiaozhou said that they are good, then these 2. You can also choose some rough maids." Xia Shirsi didn't understand why her mother asked Fengjiu, but seeing that her mother agreed, she smiled happily and let the 2 girls stand out first. "Thank you, madam." The 2 little girls hurriedly bowed and thanked her with joy, and then stood aside respectfully. Xia Shirsi picked a dozen more girls and asked them to stand out, then asked her mother, "What about these? Are they good?" The beautiful woman looked at Fengjiu again. Although she didn't speak, she smiled. Fengjiu looked at the smile, couldn't help but smile and lower her head, feeling depressed. Why did she keep looking at her? She wouldn't want her to choose again, right? Just as she was thinking, she heard her gentle voice, "Xiao Zhou, help Xiao Shi look at these people." As soon as these words came out, Xia Yan's eyes moved slightly. The first time was fine, but there was a second time. This Feng Zhou was just a simple and honest boy. What did he have that made his wife treat him differently? He couldn't help but feel curious, and his gaze fell on Feng Zhou. Shai Yu and his cousin also felt strange. They looked at their parents and then looked at Feng Zhou without speaking. Feng Zhou's scalp went numb from the countless pairs of eyes that were filled with curiosity, inquiry, and doubt. She raised her head and glanced at the beautiful woman. "Go ahead." The beautiful woman smiled gently and motioned for Feng Zhou to step forward to choose. Thus, Feng Zhou had no choice but to step forward and push a few of the pretty girls back. Finally, only 10 people were left out of the 17 or 18 people. Those people are all very good-looking. Why not? Xia Shirsi asked doubtfully. Her mother said that the servants were also the face of the master, so she had to choose the good-looking ones. She had chosen in this direction, but who would have thought that the best-looking ones would be pushed back by Feng Zhou? Feng Zhou scratched his head with his hand and revealed a simple and honest smile. He chuckled in his heart, "Little girl, these people haven't even entered the house yet, but they are already throwing coquettish glances at me shyly. What will happen after they enter the house? And I'll listen to Xiao Zhou." The beautiful woman nodded with a smile and looked at her son, Yutong. "You choose some." Chapter 2605. Feng Zhou's mouth twitched when she heard this. What's wrong with this family? Xia Yan also smiled when he saw this. "Well, I think Xiao Zhou has chosen well. Let him choose the rest." He looked at the 12 people on the side and said to Feng Zhou, "There are 12 people here. Pick 8 more. Make 20 people." As soon as he finished speaking, he had the steward bring out another batch of slaves. However, in this batch of slaves, other than men and women, there were also middle-aged men. Therefore, in this batch of slaves, other than the word mixed, some of them had higher cultivation. Feng Zhou sighed softly in her heart. She knew that the beautiful woman might want to test her, or to see what kind of person she was. Although she could pretend to be ignorant and choose at will, she didn't. Thinking that she would stay in their family for a while, she also knew that it was useless to keep hiding. What's more, her throat would be better in a few days and she would have to speak. At that time, she couldn't pretend to be mute and say nothing. Therefore, after the steward changed a batch of slaves, she walked past those people and looked at them one by one. Finally, she picked 4 women and 4 men from the 50 people. Out of the 4 women she had picked out, 2 of them were around 16 or 18 years old. She had prepared them for the beautiful woman, and the other 2 were around 30 or 40 years old. She had written down some questions on a piece of paper that she had prepared beforehand. Therefore, these 2 were going to be the kitchen maids. As for the other 4 men, one was about the same age as Shai Yutong and was going to be his personal servant. The other 2 were about 15 or 16 years old and were going to be errand boys. The last one was a middle-aged man. This person's strength was not the highest among these people, but he exuded integrity between his eyebrows. She was going to use this person as their steward. She felt that this person should have the ability. After the final selection, she also wrote down the arrangements of these people on paper and showed them to the beautiful woman. Since the beautiful woman wanted to see her ability, she naturally had to show it. What's more, it was just the ability to recognize people, which was easy for her. When the couple saw the Feng Zhou's arrangement, their hearts were slightly moved. The couple looked at each other and smiled. In the end, the beautiful woman said, "And that's all." You guys wait for me in the carriage. I'll go take care of the things behind. Xia Yan smiled. After speaking to them, he asked the steward to bring those people over. At the same time, he asked the steward to handle the handover. Mother, are the people Xiao Jiu picked good? Xia Shirsi hugged her mother's arm and asked curiously. Even Sha Yutang pricked up his ears and listened. Chapter 2606. Who said that Xiao Jiu should be with you? The beautiful woman smiled and looked at Feng Zhou, saying, You will be the chief steward in the mansion in the future. You will be in charge of everything in the mansion. Hearing this, Feng Zhou was stunned. He quickly waved his hand, indicating that he couldn't do it. Sha Yutang stared at him, chief steward. Him. His eyes fell on Feng Zhou, but he couldn't see what was so good about him. Xia Shirsi blinked and looked at Feng Zhou, and then said to her mother, But Grandpa said that Xiao Jiu could be a manservant with my brother. That's because there was no manservant in the mansion before. Now it's different. She said softly. When Xia Yan came back, she said to them, Well, I'll take them back first. If you want to buy anything else, go ahead. Well, my husband, you can go back first. We'll be home later. The beautiful woman said and put down the curtain. Feng Zhou was sitting on the edge of the carriage. Now seeing this, he nodded to Xia Yan and drove the carriage to the largest cloth store in the city. In front of the cloth store, Feng Zhou stopped the carriage and opened the curtain to let them get down. The first one to get down was Sha Yutang. He jumped down directly and stood beside the carriage to look around. Xia Shirsi also jumped out of the carriage with one hand, just like Sha Yutang. The beautiful woman behind her frowned slightly. Xiao Shi, you are a girl. You should pay attention to your behavior. My brother also got down like this. She looked back with a smile and said, looking at the cloth store with surprise and joy, So many beautiful fabrics, wow. There are even clothes made. As soon as her voice fell, she ran directly in without waiting for them. This crazy girl. The beautiful woman helplessly shook her head. Just as she was about to get off the carriage, she saw Feng Zhou reaching out his hand to help her down. She looked at Feng Zhou and gently smiled before reaching out to hold his hand. However, when she held Feng Zhou's hand, her heart slightly trembled. She couldn't help but look at the hand she was holding and her gaze slightly shifted. After getting off the carriage, the beautiful woman said to Feng Zhou, You can stop the carriage here. You can also come in and choose. Feng Zhou nodded and followed her in. Mother, this cloth is so beautiful. I want to use it to make clothes. Xia Shirsi held her mother's hand and said. If you like it, then buy it. As the beautiful woman spoke, she let them choose. She and Feng Zhou went to the side and picked some cloth for the servants. Then she looked at Feng Zhou and asked, Xiao Zhou, which one do you like? Feng Zhou looked around and then went to the side to pick 2 sets of cyan clothes. He pointed at the clothes for the beautiful woman to see. And this style is not bad. Since you like cyan, then I'll pick some more and have them make more clothes for you. As the beautiful woman spoke, she picked a few more pieces. In the end, she had the servants bring the selected pieces to the counter and let them make clothes according to the size. Feng Zhou looked at her buying so much and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He felt that it was the same everywhere. When this woman bought things, it was scary. Mother, this material is very beautiful. If I make clothes for you, it will definitely look even better. Xia Shirsi carried a piece of silk cloth over. It was a piece of sky blue material with floats on it. Whether it was the texture or the quality, it looked incomparable. Chapter 2607. Shopkeeper, I want that piece of ice silk satin. A cold and arrogant female voice called out. Fengzhou and the rest turned around to look. They saw a beautiful woman dressed in a white veil. She was accompanied by several bodyguards. Judging from their attire and appearance, they should be members of an aristocratic family. Xie Shixi saw the woman's gaze fall on the cloth she was hugging. She snorted and said, "What ice silk satin? This is the cloth I picked out. I want to make clothes for my mother." As she spoke, she hugged the cloth tightly as if she was afraid it would be snatched away. The woman in white looked at Xie Shixi with contempt. Her arrogant gaze swept over the beautiful woman and Fengzhou. She said, "You don't even know what ice silk satin is, what's the use of buying it?" She walked in step by step until she was in front of Xie Shixi. She reached out to touch the cloth and said in a soft and arrogant voice, "Ice silk satin is woven from the silk of ice silkworms. When you wear it, flames won't be able to get close to you. Especially in the summer, it will give you a cold feeling." She paused, raised her chin slightly, and glanced at them with arrogance. "This kind of material is not something that anyone can afford. It's none of your business. In any case, I saw it first. My family can afford it." Xie Shixi was dissatisfied with being looked down upon. She angrily glared at the woman and ran to the counter with the cloth in her arms. "Shopkeeper, I want to buy this as well. I want it to be the most beautiful dress for my mother." When the beautiful woman heard these words, a gentle and happy smile appeared on her face. She rubbed Xie Shixi's head with a doting expression on her face. After which, she looked towards the white-clothed lady and asked in a warm voice, "Miss, may I know if you have reserved this cloth in advance?" The woman in white was startled. She moved her mouth and looked at the beautiful woman. She only said, "I've already come to look for it several times." "Then did you pay a deposit?" The beautiful woman looked at the shopkeeper and asked. The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment. He looked at the beautiful woman and continued, "No, it's just that Miss Ruan has been here several times. I also told her that there would be a bolt of material coming over in the next 2 days. This material just arrived today, so Madame took a fancy to it. The material was good, but there was only one piece." The Ruan family was a large aristocratic family in the city. The madam had also said that the clothes would be sent to the Xie residence after they were done. The Xie residence was also a large aristocratic family in the city. He couldn't afford to offend either party. "So you're saying that this material hasn't been ordered yet? Since we've taken a fancy to it, we should naturally buy it first. Shopkeeper, don't you think this is reasonable?" The beautiful woman's voice was gentle like a spring breeze, causing the mood of those who heard it to change. Fengzhou watched from the side and thought to himself, no wonder Xia Yan still married her even though she can't cultivate. It seems that she is indeed extraordinary. "You dare to steal from me? Do you know who I am?" The woman in white was only 16 or 17 years old. How could she be a match for the beautiful woman? She couldn't keep her cool. The beautiful woman turned around and looked at the woman in white with a gentle smile. She said softly, "I haven't asked for Mrs. name. I'm the third Miss of the Ruan family's main branch. I want to buy this material for my mother as a birthday gift." Chapter 2608. Third Miss Ruan, everything is first come first served. Moreover, I have the ability to buy this material. Why don't you pick something else? I think that since this cloth shop is so big, there must be a lot of good materials. Shopkeeper, don't you think so? She looked at the shopkeeper and asked. Yes, yes, yes. There are a few bolts of good materials. Third Miss Ruan, how about I show them to you? The shopkeeper asked carefully. I only want ice silk satin. The white-clothed woman said as she continued to stare at the material. Hearing this, the shopkeeper was a bit embarrassed. This is the only piece left. There is no more in the entire city. Even if we transfer the goods from other places, it will take at least half a month to get the goods. The beautiful woman silently paid the bill and told the shopkeeper to make the clothes with the cloth. At this time, the white-clothed woman saw this and angrily left with a flick of her sleeve. Seeing the white-clothed woman leave with the guards, the beautiful woman smiled and asked, "Shopkeeper, is third Miss Ruan's mother the head of the Ruan family, Fong Yurong?" "Yes, that is third Miss Ruan's mother. I heard that in a few days, it will be her birthday. Third Miss Ruan has already come here several times. Normally, people can't afford ice silk satin. I didn't expect that Madam would take a fancy to it." The shopkeeper shook his head and smiled. He was also quite helpless. Hearing this, the beautiful woman smiled and said, "Shopkeeper, you just said that there are a few pieces of good materials. Let me see them." Okay. The shopkeeper quickly took out a few pieces of material and placed them in front of her. "Madam, please take a look. These are all top-quality materials. It is very comfortable to wear. Moreover, there is only one bolt of this material. Even if you wear it out, no one will be able to find the same." The beautiful woman's hand touched the bolts of material and finally picked out a dark gold one. She said to the shopkeeper, "Put this bolt and this ice silk satin in a beautiful box and send it to the Ruan family's head of the Ruan family, Fong Yurong." Hearing this, Xie cried out, "Mother, why are you giving such good materials to the head of the Ruan family? We don't even know her." Shai Yutong was also a little confused. His mother was not the kind of person who would make friends with others. Although it was just 2 bolts of cloth, her behavior was somewhat puzzling. Fengjiu lowered his eyes and stood there quietly, as if he was not surprised by the beautiful woman's arrangement. At this moment, the shopkeeper also asked with some doubt, "Madam, you said that you want to send this to the Ruan family for the mistress of the Ruan family?" "Not bad." The beautiful woman smiled. "She and I are old acquaintances. We haven't seen each other for many years. I didn't expect to meet her daughter here. Since it's her birthday in a few days, I'll trouble the shopkeeper to send this over." Xie was a little dumbfounded. Her mother was actually an old acquaintance of the Ruan family's mistress. Thus, after settling the matter, they also brought some ready-made clothes back first. The group then boarded the carriage and went to other places. After buying some things, they went to the Xie residence. When they arrived at the residence, Fengjiu took her new clothes and took a bath first. After changing into the new clothes, she looked even neater than before. Chapter 2609. Ruan Mansion. Looking at the 2 pieces of cloth in front of her and thinking of what the person who sent the cloth just said, Fong Yurong looked slightly surprised and whispered softly, "It's her?" She leaned on the table and pondered for a while, then said to the people around her, "Go and call the 3rd Mississippi, eh? Why is this ice silk satin in our house? Mother, where did it come from?" As soon as she entered the door, she saw the 2 pieces of cloth on the table, one of which was the one she saw outside today. "I ask you, did you meet a beautiful woman outside today?" Fong Yurong asked slowly, her eyes falling on her daughter. "How do you know?" 3rd Miss Ruan was stunned, looked at the cloth, and then suddenly realized, "I know, is it because that woman didn't dare to take it, so she sent this cloth here?" "Don't talk nonsense," she scolded in a low voice. "Tell me, what does that woman look like? Does she have no cultivation?" She felt strange about her mother's attitude. Although she was puzzled, she still said, "She looks beautiful, but I don't think she is as beautiful as mother. As for cultivation, she does have no cultivation." She looks like an ordinary beautiful woman. At that time, there was a boy and a girl next to her, who were her children. Hearing this, she pondered and said to a middle-aged woman beside her, "Ask someone to find out where she lives. In addition, prepare an invitation. Invite her and her children to my birthday banquet." "Yes." The middle-aged woman on the side responded and then retreated. "Mother, why do you want to invite them?" "I don't like that woman," third Miss Ruan said unhappily. Hearing this, she frowned and said, "You are the third Miss of the Ruan family. You should pay attention to your words and deeds. What should be said and what should not be said. You have to have a sense of propriety. Go. Don't go out these days. Stay at home and help to prepare for the banquet." "Yes." Seeing that her mother's face had darkened, she responded, bowed, and retreated. At night, Fingyo was lying in bed, thinking about what happened today. She felt that this beautiful woman was somewhat unfathomable. Lying in bed, she released her divine sense and felt that Sha Yutang, who was in the same courtyard, had fallen asleep. She quietly got up, changed into a black dress, and took advantage of the night to sneak out. She avoided some of the hidden guards in the manor and prepared to go to Manor Head Xie's residence to look for clues about the stairway to immortality. When she passed by the old man's courtyard, she faintly heard the sound of a conversation. Thus, she restrained her aura and quietly went to the roof. Through a small gap, she saw the two people sitting and talking. It was Xia Yan and his father. "Now that I've arrived, I've become the third elder of the main family, and the southern courtyard has been given to us. In the eyes of others, this is an extremely good thing, but the more it is like this, the more worried I am." The old man sighed softly and shook his head. "I know what father is worried about, and I also know why the patriarch and the others value our family so much. There is of the heavens of the of our family, there is, of the of the family of the family of the family. Of the family, there are of the family of the family." Chapter 26:10. His voice paused and he let out a deep breath. He knew very well where this treatment came from. If something were to happen to him, the status of his father, wife, and children in the Xia family would plummet and no one would be able to protect them. The stairway of immortality is like a stairway to heaven and a stairway to hell. Those who can climb it are immortals. Those who can't climb it are reduced to dust. Sigh. The old man sighed. Even so, there are still people who want to try the stairway of immortality every year. However, very few succeed. I'm afraid I won't be able to stay here for much longer. In about 7 to 8 months, the stairway of immortality will open. When that time comes, I'll have to go there and wait, Xia Yan said. He thought about his wife and children and his heart sank. When the time comes, try it. If you can't do it, hurry up and come down. Don't let the stairway of immortality force you down. You should know that if you come down, you can preserve your strength. However, if the stairway of immortality force you down, it's hard to say. I know, he nodded and thought of something. Father, what do you think of Fingzhou? Fingzhou? What's wrong? Why do you ask this? The old man looked at him in surprise. Fingzhou, who was lying on the roof, also raised his eyebrows and listened to the conversation below. It's like this, today. He told him about the matter of letting Fingzhou choose the person. Finally, he said, originally, I thought that Fingzhou was a simple and honest young man. However, after seeing him today, I feel that he is somewhat different. Hearing this, the old man stroked his beard and thought for a while, then said, if it's really as you say, then he is indeed somewhat different. However, one thing is for sure. This young man has no ill intentions towards our clan. Furthermore, we only met him on the way here. Even if he has some secrets, it's normal. As long as he doesn't do anything to harm our clan, it's fine. Fengjiu listened and quietly left. Just like how he came, he avoided the hidden guards and returned to his room. Originally, she wanted to go to the main house to find out more information. However, it seemed that there was no need for that. As long as she followed Xia Yan, she would naturally be able to reach the stairway of immortality. The next day, the gatekeeper received the invitation from the Ruan family. The invitation was handed to the beautiful woman by Fengjiu. Mother, who made this post? What do you do? Xie Shixi held a fruit in her hand and ate it while looking at the post opened by her mother. The beautiful woman glanced at it and smiled. It's an invitation from the mistress of the Ruan family, inviting us to her birthday banquet in 2 days. Is father going too? She asked curiously. Your father won't be going. This is just a banquet for some of the female members of the family. You can make friends with some of the children of the aristocratic families in the city. The beautiful woman said as she put away the invitation. Will Xiao Jiu be there too? Xie Shixi thought for a moment and asked, will the man and woman be there together? No, we'll be seated separately. As the beautiful woman spoke, she looked at Fengjiu and asked, Xiao Jiu, is your throat better? I've asked the kitchen to prepare something to soothe your throat. You can go and eat it later. Hearing this, Fengjiu paused for a moment and then nodded. The beautiful woman looked at him and smiled, then warmly said, when the banquet starts, you should come with us. Xiao Shi, I'll take care of the female guests. You'll have to take care of the jade hole. Chapter 26:11. The beautiful woman shook her head and said, you have to learn to restrain your temper. It's one thing at home. If you always act like this outside, it's easy to get into trouble. Mother, I'm here to find Fengjiu. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Sha Yutang said and said to Fengjiu beside him, you go out with me. Then he strode out. Fengjiu saluted to the beautiful woman, and then followed Sha Yutang out. When they came outside, Sha Yutang glanced back and said in a low voice, the children of the main family asked me to learn from each other. You go with me. Don't let my parents know. Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at him, took out a pen and paper and wrote a line, telling him that she would go to the kitchen first. It's not dinner time yet. What are you going to do in the kitchen? Sha Yutang frowned and said, okay, you go. I'll wait for you at the gate. Hurry up. After watching him leave, Fengjiu stepped to the kitchen. The beautiful woman said that there was something in the kitchen to moisten her throat, so she went to have a look first. All the way to the kitchen, the maidservants in the mansion all bent their knees and saluted, respectfully calling the chief steward. Yes, the beautiful woman had told everyone in the mansion that she was the chief steward of the mansion, and she was in charge of the big and small things in the mansion. In fact, she was in charge of the affairs of the servants in the mansion, and as for other things, the beautiful woman was in charge of herself. She couldn't understand why the beautiful woman valued her so much. In her view, what she showed was also normal, and there was nothing eye-catching. Instead, she couldn't see through the beautiful woman. She went to the kitchen, and Sha Yutang waited for Fengjiu at the gate outside. He looked back from time to time, but he didn't see Fengjiu's figure. He was a little impatient. When he wanted someone to go to the kitchen to have a look, he saw the cyan figure coming out from inside. Hurry up, I'm waiting for you. He waved and strode to the main house of the Xie family. Feng Nine followed him into the main house and went all the way to the martial arts field of the main house. Before they got close, they saw more than a dozen teenagers of the same age as Sha Yutang standing there. They were talking in groups of 3 or 4. When they saw Sha Yutang coming, they all looked at him and looked him up and down. Are you Sha Yutang, who moved into the mansion in the south courtyard these 2 days? A young man asked. His gaze swept up and down as he said, I thought he was an outstanding young man, but it turns out that he's only a so-so. Who are you? Sha Yutang glared at the young man in front of him with displeasure. My grandfather is the grand elder of the Xie family. The young man raised his chin arrogantly. Ha! Who are you? It turns out to be the grandson of the elder. Sha Yutang said, no longer looking at him. Instead, he stepped forward and said, didn't you say that you wanted to compete with me? I'm here. The youths looked at each other, and one of them stepped forward with a smile. The clan forbids infighting, so we can only spar with each other and not injure each other. I know. Sha Yutang nodded. Chapter 26:12. Before the teenager could speak, Sha Yutang said, he is my follower. I asked him to come with me and let him watch over there. Hearing this, the teenager looked away and no longer paid attention to Fingzhou. Instead, he asked all the teenagers to come together and discuss the rules of the competition. Fingzhou looked at them. Seeing that these teenagers were all in high spirits and their faces were full of excitement, she couldn't help raising the corners of her mouth slightly. At this age, they had the protection of their families and could indeed do whatever they wanted without any worries. Although she was also quite carefree, there were too many enemies and too many troubles. It had been a long time since she was like these teenagers who could do whatever they wanted. She found a place to sit down, took out a fruit from her sleeve and ate it while watching the teenagers compete in the field. Yes, it was indeed as they said. It was only a spar, and no one was injured. After eating the fruit, she was a little bored. After all, from her point of view, they were just like children playing tricks. There was nothing interesting about it. She didn't know why Sha Yutang asked her to come here. Seeing that there was nothing for her to do here, she wanted to find a place to relieve herself. When she was about to leave, she caught a glimpse of a cold light from the corner of her eye. She immediately stopped and looked at the cold light. Sha Yutang and a teenager were in the field, while the others were watching outside. One of the teenagers held a small flying knife in his hand under his sleeve. The flying knife shone a cold light under the sun, which was discovered by her. She glanced at the teenager with the flying knife and remembered that he was the grandson of the first elder. However, what did he want to do with the flying knife in this competition? Just as he was thinking, he saw a sinister smile at the corner of his mouth. His vicious eyes stared at Sha Yutang, who was fighting with the teenager. The next moment, he suddenly took a step back and injected spiritual power into his hand to shoot the flying knife out while no one was paying attention. The sudden flying knife attacked Sha Yutang, which shocked the surrounding teenagers. They whispered, "Why is there a flying knife? Sha Yutang, get out of the way." Sha Yutang was repelling the teenager. When he turned around, he saw a flying knife coming. He instinctively wanted to avoid it, but his reaction speed was not as fast as the flying knife. Hiss! Dodge! Seeing that the flying knife was aimed at Sha Yutang's life, the surrounding teenagers were all scared. They just wanted to learn from each other, but they didn't expect that someone would secretly attack him. If Sha Yutang was shot by the flying knife and died here, they were afraid that none of them could escape the responsibility. Seeing the flying knife flying towards Sha Yutang's life gate, the grandson of the first elder couldn't help but worry. In fact, he didn't want to kill Sha Yutang. He just wanted to teach him a lesson and let him taste the bitterness. The flying knife just now was not aimed at Sha Yutang's vital point, but moved as Sha Yutang dodged. At present, seeing the situation out of control, he was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. Fingzhou glanced at those people, and his gaze swept over the face of the youth who was retreating. Immediately, He condensed spiritual energy on his finger and flicked it out, knocking the flying knife to the ground. Clang! Chapter 26:13. Shy Yutong swallowed, and a drop of cold sweat on his forehead dripped down his cheek. His hands trembled slightly, and his eyes moved to the ground. The next moment, his fear was replaced by anger. He picked up the flying knife, held it in his hand, and stared at the crowd. Who wants to plot against me? You'd better stand up by yourself, otherwise, I must make a fuss about it to the head of the family. Hearing this, the grandson of the first elder turned pale and his body trembled slightly. He was just impulsive and didn't think about the consequences. Now when he heard that Shy Yutong was going to find the head of the family, he suddenly panicked. If his grandfather knew it, he would be killed. It's not me. It's not me either. Me neither. I'm not standing in that direction either. The teenagers around waved their hands one by one and said that they didn't do it. Who is it? Who on earth did such a wicked and cowardly thing? Shy Yutong asked angrily. His eyes swept over the crowd, and suddenly fell on the pale grandson of the first elder. He strode forward and said, Is it you? Did you do it? No, it's not me, no, no. He stepped back, waving his hands and saying, but he didn't dare to look at him. His face was filled with panic, but the surrounding youths vaguely understood what was going on. Fengjiu watched from the side. After glancing at the teenagers, his eyes fell on Shy Yutong again. It could only be said that the boy was lucky. If he hadn't pulled her here, and she happened to be here, he would have been in trouble. She watched Shy Yutong questioning there. She walked forward step by step, and the boy stepped back step by step. Finally, he fell to the ground with his legs weak, and admitted it with a pale face. She raised her eyebrows in surprise, because she saw that Shy Yutong just scolded the man and warned him. He asked the man to apologize to him and promised that he would not do such a thing again in the future, and then he returned the knife to him. Why did the flying knife suddenly fall just now? Seeing that Shy Yutong didn't pursue the boy, others also began to talk about it. Yes. I was scared to death just now. Yutong, when the flying knife shot at you, you were also scared, right? I see that you're frozen there and can't move. Perhaps it was because of the way he handled things that all the youths accepted him. For a moment, all of them surrounded him, asking questions and laughing with their arms around his shoulders. You don't say. Just now, the flying knife was about to stab me, but it seemed to have been knocked down by a stream of air. Shy Yutong recalled that when the flying knife hit him just now, there was a stream of air that knocked the flying knife down, and the stream of air brushed past his face, which made him feel it clearly. Airflow. How could this be? It should be that Xia Yuliang's hand strength wasn't strong enough, so the throwing knife fell halfway. How is that possible? It shouldn't be like that. Another person said. What else? There isn't even a single shadow guard here. Don't tell me that it was the shadow guard who struck the flying dagger. A youth said as he pointed at the empty space. Fengjiu listened to their conversation and turned to leave. Before she left, she drank several bowls of soup to soothe her throat and wanted to find a place to relieve herself. Chapter 26:14. Fengjiu stopped and looked back at him. He stretched out his hand and made a gesture. Regardless of whether he understood it or not, he left first. Yutong, what's that guy doing? Is he really your follower? He doesn't look like one. Yes. Also, what did he mean by gesturing with his hand? Can't he speak? Shy Yutong listened to their words and said, That guy is my follower. He can't speak because of his throat. He will be fine in a few days. That's all for today. I'll invite you to drink some other day. He patted the shoulders of several people around him, pushed them away and quickly chased after Fingzhou. You have to remember to invite us to drink some other day. The people at the back were still shouting and laughing happily. Only the grandson of the great elder had already left quietly. Where are you going? I haven't left yet. Shy Yutang said beside him. Fingzhou handed him the written words and walked back quickly without saying anything. Outhouse. Seeing these two words, Shy Yutang's mouth twitched. He didn't say anything and returned to the mansion with him. After arriving at the mansion, he said to him, "Go ahead. Come back to the courtyard when you're done. I have something to ask you." He didn't see who threw the knife. Fingzhou had been watching on the side. He should have seen it, right? Shy Yutang didn't know that after he and Fingzhou left, a secret guard reported what happened in the martial arts field to the master. When Fingzhou returned to the courtyard, he saw Shy Yutang come forward and ask if she saw who did it. She naturally shook her head and told him that she didn't, and this matter was left unsettled. However, in the evening, the first elder came with his grandson, Xia Yuliang, with an apology gift. Therefore, this matter was known by the beautiful woman and Xia Yan. In the hall, it's all Yuliang's fault. After I brought him to apologize to Yutang, I will put him in purgatory for 3 months. The first elder looked at Xia Yan and said, I also brought some gifts for Yutang to calm his nerves. This time, no matter how you look at it, Yuliang is in the wrong. I will definitely discipline him well. I only hope that our family will not be affected because of this. Hearing this, Xia Yan and his wife looked at each other. Finally, Xia Yan said, if the first elder hadn't come, we wouldn't have known it. However, since Yutang didn't say anything, I think he has forgiven Yuliang. The first elder doesn't have to worry about this matter. Good, good. That's good. I'm relieved to hear that. The first elder nodded with a smile, feeling relieved. After a while, he said, Patriarch also asked me to ask on your behalf, who is that young man by Yutang's side? Hearing this, the couple looked at each other and briefly explained the situation to the first elder. Oh, I see. The first elder nodded suddenly. In this case, I will take Yuliang back first. The first elder has ordered him to go to purgatory tomorrow. Seeing this, after the first elder left, they called Yutang and asked him to understand. Finally, they asked him to leave first and called Fingzhou. Fingzhou, who entered the hall, looked at the two sitting above, walked forward and saluted. Then he looked up at them and asked silently. Chapter 26:15. Hearing this, Fingzhou shook his head. Seeing this, the two of them looked at each other and did not ask any more questions. All right then. You can leave first. Thus, Fingzhou also turned and left. After she left, the two people in the hall began to whisper. According to First Elder, there were no shadow guards around at that time. The shadow guards closest to them were also unable to do that. At that time, only Fingzhou was standing not far away, so there were some suspicions. Xia Yan said, frowning slightly, condensing qi and being able to accurately deflect flying daggers, this person's strength is not weak. Since Yutang is fine, then it's fine. Even if we don't know who it is, we know that this person saved Yutang. The beautiful woman said softly, then said, in 2 days, I will be going to the Ruan family. The invitation says that I will be bringing along my son and daughter, so I was thinking of bringing Fingzhou with me. Let him look after Yutang and don't let him cause any trouble. And, you can decide. I want to tell you that I am preparing to go into seclusion to cultivate. Now that father is also in seclusion, you have to take care of everyone in the residence. I know, don't worry. The beautiful woman smiled and agreed. In the residence, Fengjiu narrowed his eyes on a large tree, listening to the faint whispers in his ears. It is said that the treasure exchange building in the city has all kinds of things. I really want to take a look. The treasure exchange building is not a place that ordinary people can enter. People of our status can't enter. And I also heard that the people who enter the treasure exchange building are all people of status. No matter how curious we are, we can't enter. Fengjiu opened his eyes on the tree. It was the voice of the shadow guards in the dark, talking about the treasure exchange building in the city. Treasure exchange building. Since she had nothing to do here, she might as well take advantage of the night to go out and take a look. After making up her mind, she returned to her room to prepare some things. When night fell, she left the manor alone. After leaving the Xia estate, he found a place to change into a red robe and removed the disguise on his face. At the same time, he took out a mask and walked out from the shadows. After inquiring about the location of the treasure exchange pavilion, he headed towards the treasure exchange pavilion. There were rules outside the building. Fengjiu glanced at it and smiled. He took out a badge from his space and pinned it to his chest before stepping inside. Seeing the badge on Fengjiu's chest, the guards did not dare to stop her. On the contrary, they respectfully bowed and invited her in. Then, another person quickly entered the building. Manager, there's an alchemist wearing the Alchemy Saint's badge outside. Here, there were very few people who could reach the Pill Saint level. They all knew the few Pill Saints in the city, but they had never seen the one who came tonight before. Hearing the guard's words, the steward knew that the visitor was an unfamiliar face, so he asked, "Have you invited him in?" "Where is he now?" "He's in the third room on the second floor. A servant girl is waiting on him. And, you can leave. I'll go take a look." The steward waved his hand and stood up with his hands behind his back. He paused thoughtfully for a moment before walking out. Chapter 26:16. When the steward came in from outside, his gaze fell on the masked man dressed in red sitting at the table. Even though he had seen many outstanding men and women, when he saw this man whose face could not be seen, he was still stunned. He was not stunned by this man's appearance, but by the aura that emanated from this man's body. He just sat there, lazily supporting his head with one hand, and gently swirling the wine cup in his other hand. His red robe was dazzling, and his aura was even more breathtaking. Especially that mask, although his face could not be seen, it added a mysterious aura to him. His posture was leisurely, with a hint of indolence. That devilish and seductive aura was free and easy, and the wanton manner in which he moved made people unable to take their eyes off him. The bottomless eyes hidden under the mask, as well as the noble aura that was formed from it, made it impossible for the manager to have the slightest bit of carelessness in his actions or thoughts. After adjusting his emotions, he cupped his hands and bowed to the man in red, and respectfully asked, "I am the manager of this building, surnamed Lin. How should I address you?" "Ghost Doctor," Fengjiu said slowly. Hearing this, Manager Lin was slightly startled. Ghost Doctor. He seemed to have never heard of such a person as the Ghost Doctor. "How can I help you, Ghost Doctor?" Fengjiu took out a pill bottle and placed it on the table. "This is a pill that can allow a cultivator at the peak of the Sage Immortal stage to break through to the Immortal Emperor stage." Hearing this, Manager Lin's eyes narrowed, and his gaze fell on the small bottle on the table. A pill that could allow a cultivator at the peak of the Sage Immortal stage to break through to the Immortal Emperor stage. Was that possible? Ghost Doctor, a pill that can allow a cultivator at the peak of the Sage Immortal stage to break through must be at least a 7th-tier pill. May I ask if this pill? His gaze fell on Fengjiu, and his eyes were filled with curiosity. Since your building is a place where treasures are exchanged, there should be an appraiser. Why don't you let him appraise it? Fengjiu said casually, and continued to pour wine for himself. Hearing this, Steward Lin paused for a moment. After pondering for a moment, he said, "All right, then please take a seat, Ghost Doctor." He bowed and retreated, personally going to the appraiser's place in the building. In the middle of the night, several appraisers were drinking and chatting, talking about the treasures they had appraised in the past few days. At this moment, when they saw Steward Lin enter, they all stood up and bowed. Steward Lin. Although Steward Lin was only a steward, he was highly regarded by the owner of the building. Moreover, all the important matters in the building had to go through him. Therefore, although the appraisers had a high status, they still respected him. You guys continue drinking. Elder Qin, come with me. Steward Lin said as he walked forward. Hearing this, everyone was slightly surprised and asked, "It's already so late, why does Steward Lin still look like he's in a hurry? Is something the matter?" That's right. There's a saint alchemist in the building. However, he took out a level 7 pill and said it's a level 7 pill that can help a cultivator at the peak of the immortal sage realm break through. He's still waiting in the room. That's why I asked old Chen to appraise it. Chapter 26:17. His voice paused, and his eyelids lifted as he said, I reckon you've been tricked by someone. That's right, in our city, there are very few 7th level medicinal pills that appear, so how could it be possible that someone brought a 7th level medicinal pill over? He must be here to make fun of you. Another person laughed, pouring wine to drink, and said, but this person's guts are quite big, not even taking a look at where this place is, actually daring to come and cause trouble. Hearing their words, that Steward Lin shook his head, his face stern. No, I don't think that person is someone who would cause trouble. He glanced at the few of them. You haven't seen him before, but how could someone like him be an ordinary person? Who knows, what he brought over might really be a 7th level medicinal pill. The few of them were startled, somewhat surprised that Steward Lin would actually think so highly of someone. They looked at each other and put down the wine cups in their hands. Since that's the case, then let's all go over and take a look. We also want to see what kind of person can receive such an evaluation from Steward Lin. As they said that, they brushed their robes and stood up. Seeing 7 to 8 of them stand up, Steward Lin couldn't help but laugh bitterly. How about this? Let Elder Chen and Elder Ko follow me over. That person doesn't look like an ordinary person to me. Suddenly bringing so many of you over, I'm worried that he won't be happy. Among these 7 to 8 people, other than 2 who were top-grade appraisers of medicinal pills and medicines, the rest were all appraising treasures and treasures. They wouldn't be able to appraise medicinal pills over, so why not just let the 2 who understood medicinal pills go over, so as to avoid incurring the ghost doctor's displeasure? Hearing him say that, the few of them stared blankly for a moment, then laughed. All right, since you've already said so, then we won't go over. But, later on, you'll have to tell us the results of the appraisal. They laughed, and sat back down. You guys continue. Don't drink too late. As Steward Lin spoke, he walked forward with the 2 appraisers. Once again returning to the side room, Steward Lin introduced them to Fengjiu, esteemed ghost doctor. These 2 are our building's top pill appraisers. This is Elder Qin, and this is Elder Li. While Steward Lin was introducing them, the 2 old men were sizing up the masked man in red. When they saw the man in red, they finally understood why Steward Lin thought so highly of him. It had to be said that this person's temperament and aura alone were enough to shock others. Among the people who came and went from the treasure exchange pavilion, they had never seen someone more outstanding than this person. Originally, when they came over, they didn't take this matter seriously. However, when they saw the person in front of them, they couldn't help but look forward to that medicinal pill. Could it really be a 7th-tier medicinal pill? Don't waste time, let's test it. Fengzhou gestured for them to quickly test the pill. The two of them walked up to the table and took out the tools used to examine the pills. When they opened the bottle cap of the pills, they could not help but look at each other as their hearts trembled. This medicinal fragrance. Chapter 26:18. 7 Pill Veins. This really is a level 7 pill. The two of them exclaimed in unison. They couldn't help but take a deep breath as they stared at the pill that was emitting a pure spiritual aura. Let me take a look. Old Chen suppressed the excitement in his heart. He picked up a pair of tweezers that were specially used to examine medicinal pills and carefully picked up the medicinal pill. He carefully looked at the medicinal pill on the pill, as well as its color and smell. From these, he was able to distinguish the grade of this medicinal pill. Based on the veins, scent, and color of this pill, we can determine that this is a level 7 upper grade pill. The two of them exclaimed in unison. They looked at Fengzhou at the same time and asked in a trembling voice, "May I ask, where is the senior who refined this pill?" In order to refine a 7th level medicinal pill, not only were the herbs extremely old and precious, but it also required exquisite alchemy skills and profound attainments in alchemy. Only by clearly knowing the medicinal properties of each pill could one accurately refine the pill. They had seen 7th level medicinal pills before, but 7th level high-grade medicinal pills were very rare. Hearing the two old men asking where the senior who refined this pill was, Gu Ruoyun raised her eyebrows. Fengzhou couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "I refined this pill." As soon as she said this, the two old men looked at her in shock and disbelief, their faces full of disbelief. Fengzhou calmly retracted her gaze from the two old men and looked at Steward Lin, who was also in shock, and said, "I brought this pill to you because I want to use your treasure exchange house to make a deal." Hearing that it was a deal, Steward Lin calmed himself down and asked, "May I know what kind of deal the ghost doctor wants to make?" Fengzhou toyed with the wine cup in one hand and slowly said, "You can keep this pill for yourselves, or you can spread the news. However, you have to take out something of the same value as this pill in exchange for it. Furthermore, I want to know everything about the Immortal Ascension Stairs in the heart of Penglai Immortal Island. Whoever has the most information will have this pill." Information about the Immortal Ascension Stairs? Hearing this, the three old men were stunned. It was already difficult enough to take out something similar to this pill, let alone information about the Immortal Ascension Stairs. However, they had a feeling that the ghost doctor was more interested in information about the Immortal Ascension Stairs than in the exchange of the pills. However, not everyone knew about the Immortal Ascension Stairs. Even the Yi Bao Pavilion only knew a little about it, and it was not complete. Thinking of this, Steward Lin looked at Fengzhou and asked, "Ghost Doctor, is there a time limit?" Fengzhou glanced at him and took a sip of the wine in his cup. Then, he slowly said, 7 days. After 7 days, if there is nothing I want, then I will take back this pill. Alright, then we'll set a limit of 7 days. However, this pill must be placed in our building for these 7 days. As for the other ghost doctor, you don't have to worry. I'll help Your Excellency Ghost Doctor with the procedures later. Manager Lin said as he glanced at the pill on the table. Seeing this, the two old men prepared to put the pill away. However, at this moment, the man in red stretched out his hand to stop them. "Ghost Doctor, what is the meaning of this?" Manager Lin asked. Chapter 26:19. Hearing this, the three of them stared blankly as they didn't understand what he meant. Until they saw him sealing up that medicinal pill in front of their eyes and turning it into a pill, the three of them then came to a realization. So it was like this. But they didn't expect that he would use this kind of sealing method to preserve the medicinal pill. It had to be said that this ancient method was indeed the best and most convenient method to preserve the medicinal pill. Not only could it seal up the medicinal pill's smell and prevent the medicinal fragrance from dissipating, it could also preserve the medicinal pill for a longer period of time. The two appraisers looked at Fengzhou's method and were secretly shocked. They were appraisers and naturally knew how harsh this method of preserving the medicinal pill was. The seemingly simple sealing of the medicinal pill was easily done by this man. Earlier on, when they heard him say that this medicinal pill was refined by him, they had their suspicions. But at this moment, when they saw his method of sealing the medicinal pill, they already knew that this ghost doctor was indeed the one who refined this 7th-level medicinal pill. Fengzhou placed the sealed medicinal pill on the white jade plate and looked towards Steward Lin. Go through the procedures. All right, ghost doctor, please take a seat. I'll be right back. Steward Lin said and turned to leave. Not long later, he came back with the items and completed the procedures for handing over the medicinal pill. Fengzhou stood up to leave and Steward Lin personally sent him out. Only when he saw his figure disappear into the night did he turn around and walk back. Leaving the Yibao house, Fengzhou knew that there were a few tales following behind her. Since she took out that medicinal pill, the people in the Yibao house would definitely think of ways to find out who she was. But was she someone who was easy to follow? After passing through a few streets in the night, she passed by a deserted corner and flashed into her space. Just as she entered her space, 4 black-robed cultivators followed behind her. When they realized that the red figure who had been following them all the way had disappeared, they were all stunned. Where's the person? Why did he disappear? Even his divine sense has disappeared. As they spoke, they looked at each other and searched the surroundings once again. Until they couldn't find that person, they then turned back, in the Yibao house. What? Lost him? When Steward Lin heard, he couldn't help but be stunned. His cultivation isn't high. With your cultivation, how could you lose him? He should have discovered us. Moreover, we locked onto his divine consciousness and followed him. However, even his divine consciousness disappeared in the end. We estimate that his strength should not be what the steward saw. Upon hearing those words, Butler Lin's eyes narrowed. It's not the strength that I saw. How is this possible? He found it hard to believe that a heaven-defying alchemist who could refine a 7th-grade medicinal pill would also be a cultivation genius. Manager, do we need to send more people into the city to search? One of them asked. Steward Lin came back to his senses and waved his hand. There's no need. You can leave first. Since he had lost him, he must have been discovered. If he continued to follow him, he was afraid that he would be annoyed. In any case, he would come back 7 days later. At that time, he could just ask around. Moreover, the Immortal Ascension Ladder. Since he asked for information about the Immortal Ascension Stairs, he must be someone who wanted to go to the Immortal Ascension Stairs. Right now, it was better for him to quickly report this matter to his master. Chapter 26-20. When he was about to go to bed, he heard Shai Yutong's voice outside. Fengzhou, you haven't slept yet, have you? I'm coming in. Shai Yutong said and reached out to push the door, but the door couldn't be pushed open. He couldn't help but stare. Why did you lock the door? Why do you lock the door when you sleep in the same yard as me? Are you guarding against thieves? Fengzhou, who was lying in bed, didn't bother to talk to him. Anyway, the door was locked, and he couldn't climb the window to get in. After all, with Shai Yutong's temperament, he couldn't climb the window. which was beneath his dignity. Did you know that I was coming, so you locked the door? I know you haven't slept yet. Tell me, where have you been all night? I haven't seen you since the evening. If the housekeeper hadn't said that you went out, I wouldn't have known that you would go out. Sha Yutong asked discontentedly outside. Seeing that Fingzhou didn't come out, he became more and more annoyed. I waited for you in the front yard for so long. How could you avoid me and go back to the yard? If the servants in the mansion hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known that you came back. Tell me, is there a servant like you? Listening to the voice, Fingzhou stretched out his hand to set up a soundproof boundary and fell asleep. Sha Yutong talked to himself outside until his mouth was dry, and then he went back to his room angrily. The next day, when Fingzhou went out of the room, she saw Sha Yutong standing in front of the door and staring at her, so she asked, "So early? Are you waiting for me?" However, as soon as her voice came out, Sha Yutong was stunned and pointed at her with a look of astonishment. You can talk." "Yes. Yesterday, I went out for a stroll in the city and bought a pill to treat my throat. Today, my throat is much better." She touched her throat and said thoughtfully. Hearing this, Sha Yutong, who was still angry, stared at her with a strange expression. "Why does your voice sound so strange?" "It's different from mine." "Is it strange?" "I think it's okay." At this time, Sha Yutong remembered that he had stood outside Qin Haodong's room for so long last night and talked for so long without getting any response. He couldn't help but ask angrily, "Why didn't you say so last night? You've been talking outside for so long, but you didn't even make a sound." "Aw. Did you talk outside my room last night?" "I don't know," she said innocently. "I fell asleep after taking the medicine. I didn't hear anything." Hearing this, Sha Yutong only felt that he had nowhere to vent his anger. He took a deep breath, glared at Fingzhou, and then left. Fingzhou looked at him strangely, rubbed his stomach, and went to the kitchen. Here, she was free. She didn't have to appear in front of the Xie family often. Instead, she could do whatever she wanted. Although she was in charge of the servants in the mansion, they didn't do anything wrong. They all obeyed the rules, so she was happy to be free. On this day, she had nothing to do in the mansion. She just walked around and occasionally practiced with Sha Yutong and his sister in the front yard. Until the day when she was going to the Ruan family's banquet, she was a little busy. She arranged the carriage early in the morning. Today, she served as the coachman. After tidying up her things, she drove the carriage to the door and waited for them. "Xiao Zhou, do you think my clothes look good today? This is the new set." As soon as Xie Shixi saw Feng Zhou, she quickly ran forward and asked with a happy face. Chapter 26-21. The beautiful woman slowly walked over. She was dressed in a crescent white dress. She was elegant and dignified. Her coiled hair did not have too many accessories. There was only a green hairpin inserted diagonally into her hair. The tassels on her waist swayed gently as she walked. It was very beautiful. The more she looked at the beautiful woman, the more she felt strange. A woman who could not cultivate and would hide in a man's arms in panic when in danger, why did she sometimes show such a mysterious temperament? Yes, she was mysterious. So far, she could not see through the beautiful woman. She always felt that she should not be so simple. "Get on the carriage," the beautiful woman said to her son and daughter. Sha Yutong and his wife got on the carriage first, and then Fingzhou helped the beautiful woman get on the carriage. After they all sat down, they sat down outside and drove the carriage to the Ruan family. The Ruan family was not far from the Xie family. In addition, Fingzhou had explored the road yesterday, so he was familiar with the road conditions. Soon, they arrived at the gate of the Rouen family. However, unexpectedly, there were 7 or 8 carriages in front of them, blocking the road. "Madam, we can't get through. The carriage has blocked the road ahead. Do you want to get off here?" She looked back and asked. It was only a dozen meters or so from here, so it was convenient to park the carriage aside. "Okay, let's get off here." The beautiful woman came out first. After getting off the carriage, she said to Fingzhou, "You can park the carriage nearby. Tell the gatekeeper of the Rouen family to keep an eye on it. Later, Shirsi will follow me, and you will follow Yutang." Hearing this, she nodded and said, "Yes." After parking the carriage, she told the gatekeeper and followed them inside. She followed Shy Yutang like a servant. Looking forward, she saw the beautiful woman walking in front of her chatting with a woman in another carriage, talking and laughing all the way. She retracted her gaze and looked around. She saw that the Rouen family's interior was also very imposing, comparable to the Xia family's main residence. Around the small path leading to the backyard, there were several hidden guards guarding in the dark. The place where the matriarch of the house held the banquet was in the backyard, and the place where the young man and the young woman stayed was separated. When they arrived at the rear courtyard, Fingzhou was not allowed to enter the inner courtyard because of his status as a servant. Thus, the beautiful woman had Fingzhou wait at the courtyard entrance for a while. Not long after she brought her son and daughter in, Shy Yutang came out first after meeting the mistress of the Rouen family. "Let's go. It said that many disciples from the clans in the city have come. Let's go take a look." Shy Yutang came to Fingzhou's side and said. Then he followed a maidservant who led the way to the other side. Fingzhou followed him to another courtyard. When he entered, he saw that there were already more than 10 men in their teens to 20s sitting inside. Behind each of them was a manservant. The arrival of Shy Yutang made those people look back. As the host, Child Ruan saw another guest coming, so he stepped forward with a smile. "I'm Child Ruan. I don't know who this is. I'm from the Xia family. My name is Shy Yutang." Shy Yutang looked at the man in front of him. He saw that the man in front of him was about 20 years old, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He had an outstanding appearance and a slender figure. Chapter 26-22. It turns out to be the young master of the Xia family. "You're late. We've all come early. Come and sit down." Seeing this, Shy Yutang went forward with the eldest young master of the Rouen family and sat down in one of the seats, while Fingzhou stood behind him. "There are several young masters of the Xia family. What's your rank? Why haven't I seen you before?" a teenager asked, looking at Shy Yutang with some doubts. He knew several direct descendants of the Xia family, but he didn't know the person in front of him. "I'm not a direct descendant. I'm a collateral descendant," Shy Yutang said, picking a grape on the small table in front of him to eat. Thinking of Fingzhou behind him, he picked a bunch and handed it to him. "Here." Fengzhou glanced at him in surprise. Seeing that he was hinting at her, and seeing that the people around her were looking at her in astonishment, she reached out to take it, plucked one, and ate it. "How is it? Sweet?" Shy Yutang asked, picking another one to eat. "Yes," she responded and motioned him to look ahead. "Are you a collateral descendant?" A teenager looked at him strangely, then looked at the eldest young master of the Ruan family and asked, "Didn't Madame Ruan invite the mistress of the Xia family? Why is a collateral descendant here?" In the eyes of these direct descendants, the status of the collateral descendant was lower than theirs. The people present were all direct descendants. They didn't expect that the Xia family sent a collateral descendant. The eldest young master of the Ruan family smiled and said, "As far as I know, the madam of the Xia family invited by my mother today is a collateral descendant. I heard from my mother that she and the madam of the Xia family are old acquaintances." His voice paused slightly, and he said with a smile, "As the saying goes, heroes are not judged by their origin. Whether they are direct descendants or collateral descendants, as long as they are talented, they will be respected. Don't you think so?" Hearing this, everyone was silent for a moment and nodded in agreement. Yes, identity is a symbol, but personal strength is also very important. So, everyone's eyes fell on Sha Yutang again. Fengzhou stood behind Sha Yutang and picked a bunch of grapes to eat. Looking at the eyes of the crowd, he thought to himself, as soon as the eldest son of the Ruan family spoke, he eased the situation. These people are now looking at the strength of Sha Yutang. However, Sha Yutang's strength is above average among his peers. Everyone started chatting, and the atmosphere gradually became harmonious. Fengzhou stood behind and ate grapes. When he finished the grapes in his hand, Sha Yutang in front of him gave him 2 more fruits. Therefore, not only the manservant standing behind other childs showed envy on their faces, but even the child sitting in front of them were very curious. "Yutang, have you always been so nice to your servants?" Someone couldn't help but ask. From the moment he sat down until now, he saw that the servant behind him had been eating fruits. "Of course not. He's different," Sha Yutang said. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but ask, "How is he different? There doesn't seem to be anything outstanding about him." A teenager couldn't help laughing. "Ha ha ha, how is he not outstanding? Look at this servant, he hasn't stopped eating since just now. He eats whatever Yutang gives him. He has eaten so much. Tell me, which servant can eat as much as him?" Since it's so precious, it must be very difficult to obtain. Moreover, this has nothing to do with us. We can't use that kind of elixir, Sha Yutang said without interest. Hearing this, everyone laughed, their intentions unclear. Even if the pill fell into the hands of the Xia clan, it would not fall into the hands of the Xia clan side branches. Moreover, the information about the stairway to immortality was even easier to obtain. Even the elders of the Xia clan were discussing this matter yesterday. Who knows which family will get it in the end? Chapter 26-24. We often compare notes with each other, and our strength is almost the same. It's not interesting to compare notes like this. After all, it's not a big competition in the family. It's better to. A teenager said. His voice paused, and his eyes swept behind the crowd. Let the servants behind us compete. They are all good at it. Let's just watch the fun. How about it? Ha ha ha, well, this is interesting. Let's compete here. We don't need to go to the martial arts field. The place in the middle is big enough. Another teenager also said excitedly, clapping his hands and looking forward to it. Since it's a manservant competing and we're just here to watch the fun, we should definitely give them some benefits. A youth in embroidered clothes said as he looked around at the crowd. Why don't we take out some trinkets as a reward for the winner? No problem. Everyone agreed. They still had some small trinkets, and giving them to these servants as a reward was already considered extremely good. Only Sha Yutang was a little hesitant. He knew that although Fengzhou looked simple and honest, he was not easy to fool. Moreover, he didn't listen to him. Let him compete with these servants. Maybe he wouldn't. Thinking of this, he looked back at Fengzhou. When he was about to speak, he heard Fengzhou's cold voice. I don't want to join in the fun. You can do it yourself. Fengjiu glanced at Sha Yutang with a faint expression. Seeing Feng Ix's expression, Sha Yutang couldn't say what he wanted to say. He turned back and smiled awkwardly at the crowd. Well, your manservant can do it. I'll pass. When the crowd heard this, they were slightly surprised. How can that be? Yutang, you are too mean, aren't you? Yes, it's just a game. It's just fun. Why don't you participate? Could it be that you're afraid that your manservant will lose? Oh, well, he usually doesn't play this game. He is a little dull and can't play this game. Let's just watch. Sha Yutang said. Seeing that the teenager was about to speak, he stood up with his hands covering his stomach. Oh, I guess I drank too much wine. I have to go to the toilet. You can play. Seeing him rushing out of the yard with his hands covering his stomach, the teenagers were stunned for a while and then laughed at the same time. Sha Yutang is really interesting. He escaped by urinating. I think his servant is more interesting. He said he didn't want to play. If Yutang wants to play, he can do it himself. The teenager in brocade sitting next to Sha Yutang laughed and said, I haven't seen any servants as bold as his. Yutang said earlier that the manservant saved his life, so he's probably unable to treat him like an ordinary manservant. Let them be. Another person said with a smile and called out the servant behind him, go and compete with them. If you win, you will be rewarded. As a result, the yard became lively again because of the competition between the manservants. Outside, Sha Yutang, who had left the yard, looked at Feng Nine beside him as he walked and said, they even used the excuse of going to the bathroom. I guess they will laugh to death. If I had known, I wouldn't have listened to my mother and brought you here today. Chapter 26-25. Why can't I get out? Sha Yutang stopped and walked back to the original place after 2 laps. He couldn't help but look back in astonishment. Did we enter a place we shouldn't enter? There's a formation here. Fengjiu said and released her divine awareness. She felt that there were no secret guards nearby. Just as she was about to speak, she heard the faint sound of a guqin coming from the front. Who's playing the guqin? Do you hear the sound of the guqin? Sha Yutang looked at Fengjiu and asked. He took a step forward and was about to follow the sound of the guqin, but was stopped by Fengjiu. Why are you pulling me? He looked back and glared at her with dissatisfaction. This is someone else's home. Don't break in. This guy was reckless. Didn't he know that curiosity killed people? I didn't break in. He continued, you see, we accidentally walked in. Since that's the case, we will also accidentally walk to the front. We didn't mean to barge in. He smiled slyly, let's go, let's go. Anyway, we've come in. Let's take a peek and see who's playing the guqin. Fengjiu sighed helplessly. If you break in like this and bump into something you shouldn't see, it will cause trouble. Come with me. Let's go to find your mother. She pulled him, but the guy shook off her hand and ran forward. What's wrong with just taking a look? Besides, what trouble can there be here? There must be someone living here since there is the sound of the zither. We can ask him how to get out of this formation. Sha Yutang walked quickly inside and followed the sound of the zither, but he still couldn't get out of the formation. Fengjiu saw this and shook her head secretly. She had to walk beside him and follow him. After 2 laps, she saw that he was about to walk to the other side. She stopped him and said, it seems that someone has just passed by that side. Let's try this side. Have they passed by it? He expressed his doubts. Yes, they have. Fengjiu said and walked to the other side. Seeing this, Sha Yutang followed him. After a while, when they got out of the formation, he looked at Fengjiu in surprise. You're so lucky. You can get out of the formation by just walking around. Fengjiu secretly rolled her eyes and ignored him. Instead, she looked around and vaguely saw a pavilion in the bamboo forest in front of her. There seemed to be a young girl playing the zither in the pavilion. It's a girl. How can she live in such a place? Sha Yutang said. Before Feng Nine could speak, he strode forward and shouted, Miss, let me ask you something. How can we get out of this formation? When the girl who was playing the zither heard the sound, she was startled. She didn't even turn her head as she stood up in a panic and ran into the forest. Because she ran too fast, she tripped over a stone on the ground and fell. However, she didn't care about the pain as she got up and ran. Sha Yutang stood not far away and watched the girl run to the forest. After a long time, he looked back at Fengjiu. Do I look scary? Why did the girl run away as soon as I said that? Fengjiu looked at the forest and looked back after a glance. He said, I don't think she often sees strangers. It's rude of us to appear like this. Let's go. Go. Where to? Do you know how to get out? Sha Yutang glanced at Fengjiu and said, It's pure luck that you can come in just now. If you go in now, you won't be able to get out even if it's dark. Chapter 26-26. Come with me. We can't go out. That woman must know how to get out. Besides, I'm the master. You should listen to me. Sha Yutang said and walked forward. He asked curiously, but all the young masters and young ladies of the Ruan family are at the banquet. Why didn't she go there? Fengjiu didn't bother to speak again and followed him. She had explored this place with her divine awareness. There was only one woman and no one else. Since he wanted to have a look, she would let him go. The two of them walked into the depths of the bamboo forest until they arrived at a bamboo house. With a sweep of her divine sense, she knew that the woman was hiding in the bamboo house. However, she felt a little strange in her heart. This was the Ruan family, and this woman should also be a member of the Ruan family. Why would she be scared to the point of hiding when she saw them? Just as she was thinking, Sha Yutang had stepped forward and knocked on the door. Is anyone there? Miss? Miss? Seeing this, Fengjiu, who was standing behind, went to the stone table outside the bamboo house and sat down. She held her cheek with one hand and looked around. After a while, she heard a small voice. You, who are you people? What are you going to do? Hearing the voice, Sha Yutang grinned and said, We are from the Xia family. Today is the birthday of the mistress of the Ruan family. Many people from aristocratic families were invited. My servant and I walked into the tactical matrix when we came out. Now we can't get out. Miss, you should know how to get out of the tactical matrix, right? Can you tell us how to get out? Fengjiu smiled. The tactical matrix seemed simple, but in fact, it was complicated. Obviously, it wanted to isolate the bamboo forest from the outside. What's more, there were no secret guards around the tactical matrix. It was obvious that the person who set up the tactical matrix knew that even if someone broke in by mistake, they couldn't get in. As for the girl who lived here, she looked like a teenager. It was estimated that she couldn't solve the tactical matrix. I don't know. The girl's voice came in a low voice. She sounded a little sad. Sha Yutang was stunned. You don't know. He instinctively looked back at Fengjiu. She doesn't know. What should we do? Fengjiu smiled and said, You are the young master. I should listen to you on this matter. Hearing this, Shy Yutong froze and smiled embarrassedly. I was just kidding. Besides, you are not a servant in my house. I just said that you are a servant in front of outsiders. Even if you want to leave our house, we can't do anything to you, right? He came to the table and sat down. He looked at Fengzhou and said, we've been out for some time. If we don't go back now, my mother won't be able to find her. I see. She looked at him leisurely and said, but there's nothing I can do. I don't know much about that array formation. I was lucky to be able to walk in. If I walk in again, I reckon I won't be able to walk out even when it's dark. Shy Yutong's mouth twitched. Why did those words sound so familiar? As the two of them were talking, the door of the bamboo house quietly opened a crack. The young girl peeked out from the crack and looked at the two of them carefully and curiously. Chapter 26-27. She was really like a frightened rabbit. However, the girl seemed to be wearing a veil. Seeing this, Shy Yutong stood up and strode to the room. Girl, would you like to come out and talk to us? Who are you? Was he being locked up here? We are not bad people. Would you like to come out? Hearing the words from outside, the girl in the room hesitated, and finally opened the door and walked out. She looked at Shy Yutong in front of her, and then looked at Fengzhou sitting at the table. After thinking about it, she turned and walked inside. After a while, she took out a plate of pastries. I'll treat you, she said in a low voice. She was a little restrained and didn't dare to look at them. She lowered her head slightly, but it was full of kindness. We just ate a lot in front. Shy Yutong didn't know much about the ways of the world. He just thought that they had just drunk some fruit in front, so he was a little full. However, before he finished speaking, Fengzhou came over and took the plate. Thank you, Fengzhou said. He took the plate and walked to the table, saying, come and sit together. The girl quickly looked up at Fengzhou, and her eyes lit up. She nodded happily, well. Then she followed Fengzhou to the table and sat down. What's your name? Fengzhou asked, picking up a piece of pastry and eating it. My name is Ruan. She lowered her head, put her hands under the table, and nervously grabbed the corner of her clothes. Who are you in the Ruan family? Why do you live here? Since he couldn't get out, Shy Yutong was not in a hurry, so he asked curiously. Thus, as the two of them questioned each other, they found out about the girl's identity and why she was here. It turned out that the girl was the fourth miss of the Ruan family, the youngest daughter of the mistress of the Ruan family. However, because there was something on her face, the medicine was useless, so she had been locked up here. Really? No matter what, you are still Madame Ruan's daughter. How could she lock you up like this? Shy Yutong was a little surprised. Their mother was very good to them. He believed that even if they had a bad disease, she would not give them up. But the girl in front of him was obviously abandoned by her family. So, you've been living here alone since you were 5 years old. Fengzhou was also a little surprised. Such a young child, could it be that he lived here alone? Maybe it was because no one of her age had come in before, or Fengzhou and Shy Yutong didn't make her feel like bad guys, so she gradually let go. Yes, my father and mother said that if outsiders knew that I looked like this, it would embarrass the family, so they let me live here by myself. However, they sent people to teach me how to read and play the zither. My big brother will also send me things every few days. You're not weak either. You're not inferior to your elder sister. Don't tell me your parents don't know. Ruan Ruyun was startled by Feng Zhou's words. She instinctively looked up. Seeing her reaction, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. Shy Yutong was stunned. He looked up and down at Wan Ruyun, and then looked at Fengjiu. How is her strength not low? Why don't I see it? Fengjiu glanced at him and said leisurely, higher than you. Chapter 26-28. Wan Ruyun looked at Fengjiu with shock and doubt in her eyes. My master said that even my father couldn't see through the hidden skills I practiced. How did you see through it? Hearing this, Shy Yutong couldn't help but stare. In that case, was this girl really stronger than him? Fengjiu smiled and said, it doesn't matter how I know. However, since your master wants you to hide it, he must have his reasons. Don't worry, we will forget about this place when we get out of here. We won't mention anything about you. The problem is that we can't get out. Shy Yutong said and couldn't help sighing. If he had known it, he wouldn't have run around and wouldn't have been trapped here. Fengjiu glanced at him and stood up. I'm lucky. Maybe I can get out of here again. Shy Yutong was stunned for a moment, but he didn't speak again. He just stood up and walked to his side. All right. I'll follow you. Maybe you're lucky enough to get out of here again. Seeing that they were about to leave, Wan Ruyun stood up in a hurry. Unexpectedly, she pressed the veil when she put her hand on the table. The veil on her face fell to the ground as she stood up, and her face covered by the veil was exposed. Ah! My God! Shy Yutong was shocked. He instinctively exclaimed and took a few steps back. After that, he patted his chest with fear and stared at Wan Ruyun. Why is your face like this? Wan Ruyun was stunned. She picked up the veil in a hurry and was about to put it on again, but Fengjiu grabbed her hand. What are you doing? She froze and lowered her head helplessly, covering her face with her hands. Fengjiu narrowed his eyes and stared at her face. There was a flash of light in his eyes. Is this the hidden disease you mentioned? Do you know this is poison? He didn't look away, but still stared at Wan Ruyun. She couldn't see the original appearance of her face. There were only some greenish-black stripes covering her entire face. What surprised her was that when she grabbed her wrist, she discovered that her primordial spirit had been sealed by someone. Moreover, she had a purine body. Wan Ruyun looked at Fengjiu in astonishment. What? Poison. How could it be? It's a disease that no one can cure. It's not poison. Who told you that it's a disease? Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. The doctors and pharmacists invited by my parents all said that it's a disease. Some said that I was haunted by ghosts and that my face couldn't be cured. Wan Ruyun said with a sad expression. She paused and looked at Fengjiu. However, my master said that as long as I work hard and cultivate, as long as I break through to the golden core stage, this disease will be cured. However, I broke through to the golden core stage a few days ago, but my face is still like this. Perhaps my face won't be cured. Fengjiu narrowed his eyes. His eyes were deep. No one knew what he was thinking. You said before that you suddenly contracted a disease when you were 5 years old, and your master also appeared at that time. He looked at Wan Ruyun and asked. Yes. Wan Ruyun didn't understand why Fengjiu asked this. Holding the veil in her hand, she hesitated and asked, Veil, can I wear it? She wasn't used to showing her ugly face in front of others. It made her feel uncomfortable and made her feel inferior. Chapter 26-29. My master is a good person. My master is very kind to me. He's a good person. She was a little angry and raised her voice. She didn't like Fengzhou talking about her master like this. Fengzhou shook his head and said, "Well, you won't believe me. Anyway, you should be careful. When we leave, you should forget all of us. Don't mention to others that we came in." She glanced at Sha Yutang, who was standing aside, and asked, "Why don't you go?" Sha Yutang came to his senses and walked quickly to Fengzhou. He looked at Wan Ruyun and finally said, "Well, we're leaving." Seeing that they were about to leave, Wan Ruyun's eyes were filled with tears. She walked quickly to Fengzhou and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shout at you. It's just that my master is really a good person." Fengzhou didn't want to say more, but when he heard her words, he said to Sha Yutang, "Go ahead and wait for me." "Ah. Why?" Sha Yutang didn't want to go, but when he met Fengzhou's eyes, he couldn't help shrinking. He instinctively walked forward and muttered with some grievances, "Why are you so fierce? Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror? You don't look like a manservant at all. Usually, you're so silly and honest in front of my mother, but outside, you're so fierce to me and order me around." When he went away, Fengzhou looked at Wan Ruyun and said, "You can meet me today. It's fate that you and I are together. I'll tell you. As for what to do, you decide for yourself." He paused and looked at her deeply and said, "There is poison on your face, but this poison is not fatal. It will only make the blue and black spots all over your face. In fact, it's easy to detoxify this poison. You just need to take the bamboo water, and it will slowly detoxify your body and reduce the poison spots on your face." Looking at the girl's startled and suspicious eyes, Fengzhou continued, "You can try it as I said. In addition, your divine awareness has been locked. From what you said before, I can infer that the person who locked your divine awareness should be your master. As for why, I have to tell you one more thing." The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she looked at the young girl's bewildered eyes and said, "You also have a purine body that is 1 in a million. What does a purine body mean? I think that since you've cultivated to this level, you should understand." A breeze blew gently, and several bamboo leaves fluttered down from the air. One of them fell on Fengzhou's shoulder. She tilted her head slightly and looked at her shoulder. She raised her hand and gently swept the bamboo leaf off. She said, "If your master is a woman, then she let you cultivate to the gold core period. I guess she wants to take over your body. If your master is a man, then, I guess she wants to use you as a furnace." She looked at her and said slowly, "Well, that's all I have to say. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. By the way, I don't like trouble. I don't want to be mentioned again." As soon as her voice fell, she turned and walked out. She came to Sha Yutang, who was kicking the stones on the ground. "Let's go. Let's see if my luck has run out." She smiled and stepped into the formation, followed by Sha Yutang. Chapter 26:30. After circling the formation twice, the two of them walked out. Sha Yutang, who was out of the array, stared at Fengzhou with a strange look and asked, "Do you know how to get out of this array?" "I'm just lucky. I came out while walking." Fengzhou smiled and continued to walk forward. "Don't lie to me. How can you get in and get out by luck? You must know how to make arrays." He looked at him as he spoke. He saw that his face was ordinary, and even if he were to walk on the streets, he would not be able to find him. But why was it that the more he interacted with him, the more he felt that he was not simple? "Hey, what did you say to her just now? Why can't I listen?" He was a little curious. What did he say to Wan Ruyun just now? Didn't we agree? Forget about it when you get out of the array. Don't mention it again. She glanced at him leisurely. Or is it that you, a so-called man, always don't mean what you say? Hearing this, Sha Yutong straightened his chest. How can it be? I always keep my word. That's good. She nodded with satisfaction and said, if someone asks, just say that you were in the toilet. Sha Yutong's mouth twitched, but he did not ask the question again. Instead, he looked at him with some inquiry. Fengzhou, who are you? What do you want to do in my house? Could it be that someone sent you to my house? Fengzhou glanced at him speechlessly. Don't you use your brain when you speak? Who invited me to go with you on the way? Who asked me to go to the Xie family? Besides, is there anything good in your house worth me sneaking in? Then why did you stay in my house? You should be stronger than me. And I find that you seem to know a lot. How could you tell that she was poisoned at a glance? Anne. He wanted to ask more, but was stopped by Fengzhou. Stop. Fengzhou raised his hand. Unconsciously, they came to the rockery. She stopped and looked at Sha Yutong. Don't worry, I have no intention to harm your family. I just don't have a place to stay for the time being. I will leave after a while. Hearing this, he was stunned. You still want to leave? Nonsense, that's not my home. Am I supposed to stay here and be a servant? She rolled her eyes impolitely and continued to walk forward. Perhaps it was because she didn't hide her true nature when she was with him, so her actions and words were more casual. You're not a servant. You're my housekeeper. I'm only a manservant today. As he spoke, he looked at him and said, actually, if you don't have anywhere to go, you can always stay at my house. Fengzhou smiled and didn't say anything, but looked ahead. When he saw Xie Shixi, he pulled Sha Yutong beside him. Look, isn't that your sister? Where is she going with that servant girl? Let's go and have a look. Sha Yutong said and strode forward. Fengzhou and Sha Yutong followed behind unhurriedly, watching the servant girl take Xie Shixi to a yard. Faintly, they heard Xie Shixi asking, why is my brother here? What is he doing here? You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.